movies and, connect them to our religion, maybe inshallah, make it so that actually in the same movie could be a form of worship. This series was spun off of Inside Out 2, and we have done anger, and then by popular demand we did anxiety. I guess you guys are stressed out as well. And so, Imam Merchant here, the format is going to be, he's going to have a lecture for about 45 minutes. Then we're going to go into question and answer. And then finally, this is the really interesting part, we do discussion circles. We're going to be asking questions about anxiety. So we hope you enjoy all these aspects. Please do stick around for all of them. And so without further ado, I have here Imam Abdul Malik Merchant. Oh yes, and we'll turn off the sheet. I'll get on to that in a second.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Allahumma alimna min ilmika ma tarda bihi anna, wa la tu'akhidna bima ta'lamu minna. Ya Halim khaliqna bi khuluq al-hilm wa haqiqna bi haqa'iq al-ilm. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana, innaka anta al-alim al-hakim. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم اجمعين. I would ask how everyone's doing, but I'll just say welcome. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all and make inshallah this gathering beneficial. I hate sitting down, so I'm going to walk if that's okay with everyone, inshallah. I'm sorry for whoever's recording that. So the topic of tonight is anxiety. And as we start off, let's recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub." Is it not in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where the hearts find tranquility? Now the challenge for us as hosts, and if I say anything that's over philosophical, please write down, let me know. I can get my head sometimes, I apologize. The challenge for us today is that we live in a world where that verse seems alien to us. That verse feels like it's from another time. And the reality is that it is. We live post-Freud. We live in a postmodern, secular world where religion has become something of the past, where how we think is not through the lens of what does God say about this and how does that impact my life. Rather, it's how do I feel about this and how can God fix it for me. And that dichotomy or that comparison between a pre-modern world where we looked at what God said about something and then tried to figure out how we could interpret our lives through that lens versus our modern world where we see how we feel and we're trying to figure out how God can solve it for us. It causes so many problems for us, particularly with religion as a whole. How is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in the remembrance of God our hearts find tranquility, and I'm listening to Quran all day long, anxious, I don't know. How is it that I pray, I do these things, I'm struggling and striving with and against myself, yet it's still not there? And I want to start off by saying it's okay. As human beings, in this world that we live in, it's not even our fault. We've grown up in this society where religion has been placed secondary. We've learned to prioritize empiricism and science and our feelings and all of these other things. And religion and spirituality and beliefs are secondary. They're things that we try to fit into this complex world that we live in. And also I want to recognize that the way society is very different also. Not just from an intellectual perspective, but from a sociological perspective as well. We don't live in the same small village with all of our family, where 10 and 20 houses in both directions, we know them and we know their parents. We know what, I'm so sorry. I'm moving around.
No, you're fine.
Okay, we don't live in societies where I don't have extended family. We were just talking about having children. You start to have children, you're trying to figure out how we're going to raise these kids. And you're looking for respite, you're looking for just trying to get a breath. And you and your spouse are looking at each other like, listen, I'm tired. Or you're trying to think about how is it that we're going to live or how we're going to raise kids, and we've had to figure it all out by ourselves. In pre-modern societies, we have these third spaces. We have these places with coffee houses and all of these other spaces where you talk to elders. And you guys had conversations about what is happening and how you're feeling, and you sort of learn vicariously, you learn via osmosis just from being around other people. One, a sense of tranquility. Just, I've got people who've been here before, who understand what life is, and they've seen these things before. But also, you get advice from those people. Those people are like, listen, beta, it's going to be okay, do this, and that. They'll tell you, listen, don't even trip, it's all right. And I've seen this particularly with like mothers that have many children, and they can just like touch a baby, and the baby's like, immediately fall asleep. Just touch. And I saw it one time, mother's like, we haven't gotten this baby to sleep, take a nap in the last 6 months. Every time he goes to sleep, you have to stand next to him and tap his back. And the mom was like, oh, for real, you see? Boop, baby goes to sleep, puts him down and stays for 2 hours. Just, how did you do that? Again, there's certain things that you can't teach. So think about that when we're thinking about establishing families. Think about that when we're talking about work. Think about that in every other dimension of our lives. So those two things to start off with. How we're trained to think and view the world, juxtaposed also with the world that we live in. Both are very, very different. And so now when we're living in these new worlds, trying to figure out how do we deal with anxiety, let's talk about what the definition of anxiety is. It's the body's natural response to stress or perceived threat. We're naturally worried about something. Usually when a colloquial way of talking about it, that depression is sadness or worry over something that happened in the past. And anxiety is worry or sadness about something that is to come. And so we're worried that there's some threat that's going to happen. We don't feel safe right now because there's an impending danger that's over the horizon. And when we're living in this age, when we're not sure, and everything is so fragile, and it seems like there's so much going on, coupled with we're so interconnected, but so separate. So like we already said, that we don't have people that we can rely on, but also I know what's happening in every corner of the world intimately in 4K. And so now I'm worried, will that happen to me? Or how is that going to affect me? And how is that going to change how it is and what it is that I'm feeling? And so now when we're thinking about that and how it impacts us emotionally, I'm scared, I'm sad, I'm worried, how that impacts us mentally, our inability to move is paralyzing sometimes, how that affects us physically, and the stress that takes a toll on our bodies, and how we're not unsure about why we're waking up in the middle of the night in sweats, why we can't seem to figure out things, or why our body is shutting down, and we don't really know. There's like an undertone of stress that's just humming in the background. And so we're trying to figure out all of these things in this new world that is incredibly difficult and challenging. Yet we have these beliefs that as Muslims are supposed to be things that we legitimately believe in. They're supposed to be a source of tranquility. And so now we need to question, why is it, again, in the new world that is very secular and very spread apart, how do we look at Scripture? How do we look at Quran? How do we look at the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And how can we relate to it in a way where it actually serves us and our needs? How can we look at it in a way where we connect with it in a very real way? It's not just a book that we recite during our prayers. It's not something that we try to read cover to cover in Ramadan. All of that is wonderful. But how can it be a lived tradition that when we think about, or read the Quran, we're thinking about, well, what is God saying to me right now, specifically in this verse? So for example, if I'm stressed or I'm anxious about something, not why am I stressed? That's important. But also, what can I do to relieve that stress? And what is that stress teaching me about myself? Why I'm anxious and why this anxiety is coming up for me, and what does it teach about me and how I think about the world, how I think about God, how I think about everything in it. And so we have to think about these things. We have to be able to find the root causes of our feelings. Am I feeling anxious because of something internally, whether it be now or that happened in the past? Because we often overlook these things. Maybe I'm stressed because this reminds me of a circumstance that happened in my childhood. And so because of that, it makes me feel that that is going to come again right now. Perhaps I'm anxious about something that is happening now, and I don't see hope on the horizon. Perhaps it's something that's external. The way someone's talking to us, what we're watching and consuming on our phones or in the media. Perhaps it's a multitude of all of these things. Perhaps it's because we want to control. I want to feel like I am able to prevent anything from going wrong. And then that leads to a hyper-focus and a hyper-fixation on our lives, our children, etc. that disenables us from letting go and letting God, as our Christian brethren say. And so, perhaps it's all connected. My hopes for the future. I want to have that house and the white picket fence. I want my kids to be doctors and engineers. I want them to be successful. Perhaps it's I want to be rich. I want to be famous. I want to be strong. I want to be healthy. Whatever it is in the future, that becomes a never-ending track that plays in our heads. Now that doesn't mean we don't exhaust our needs. We know that as Muslims in our tradition, we're supposed to recognize what role we play in all of this. And so we know that when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was going to go to Medina on the Hijrah, he told Aisha to prepare for him. He told Abu Bakr to get ready. We're going to go on a journey. So get your stuff. Now that journey was also very scary. They were literally fleeing for their lives. He also told he hired someone to walk their sheep behind him to cover his tracks. So it wasn't that he just said, I believe in God, I'm going out now. He packed his bags. He told his companion that was coming with him. He hired someone to cover the tracks. He went the opposite direction. Y'all think I'm going north, I'm going to go south and go the long way so that you can't find me. And what that teaches us is as human beings, we exhaust our means. But then once we've exhausted our means, then what do we do? When we know that my frustrations, my worries, my confusion, all of this, my self-doubt, because that can then play into anxiety, my insecurities, that all of these things are causing the problem. How do I sit with myself? It's a very famous quote, مَنْ عَرَفَ نَفْسَهُ عَرَفَ رَبَّهُ. Whoever knows themselves knows their God. وَمَنْ عَرَفَ رَبَّهُ عَرَفَ نَفْسَهُ. And whoever knows their God knows themselves. And so now we have to ask ourselves, when we find that the pit of our stomach is uncomfortable, when we find that our heart is palpitating, is beating really fast, when we find that we're breaking out in sweats because we're worried about the impending future, can we interrogate and think about why? And if there's anything that I can share, I think this is really important. A lot of times we feel that we have emotions, and those emotions are just what we have. We have to I can't do anything about them. They're here, they're mine, I can't control them, and I just got to deal with them. I'm responding to the emotions that I have. Simultaneously, our connection to religion is that we want miracles. I want God to just say poof, and it goes away, without any work that I put into it. We have to challenge both of those. Meaning, the emotions that we have we have the blessing, the ability to not just feel the emotions, but introspect, to think about those emotions. We also have the ability to introspect, to think about the emotions in live, real time. And so if I'm feeling scared, can I also analyze why I'm scared or anxious? And then figure out, well, what's causing it, and how can I deal with it? What's a healthy way of me avoiding it? What's a healthy way of me dealing with it? What's a healthy way of doing those things? Because now I need to do the act of what is called an muhasabah, the act of introspective reflection and figuring out who I am and why these things are coming up. If I'm worried about, I've got a problem with my boss, And every time my boss is not recognizing me, or my boss is frustrated with me, and it's really giving me an irrational response. I get really angry, and it's really bothering me. Well, why is that causing this anxiety for me? Perhaps as a child I didn't feel recognized. Perhaps as a child I was looking for the love that I didn't have. And so we need to figure out, well, where is that coming from? Because maybe the boss didn't do anything. Your opinions didn't matter. Maybe you didn't present it in the best way possible. Maybe you did everything right and your boss just doesn't care. But in the first part, we have to sit with us. And if I can look and say, well, why is my interaction with this person causing me to be irrationally anxious? It's okay, it's normal to be upset, but now I'm going extra, overboard. I'm now thinking about this. It's on a replay loop in my head 24/7. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about my relationship with my boss. I'm thinking about work. I brought it home with me, etc. I have to now sit with me. Sit with why it's making me feel this way. Now the other part is, what do we think about God? And this is something that I want us to challenge. Not just in the theological way. Meaning, how, as Muslims in the modern age, oftentimes we connect with our religion. If I ask you, who is Allah? You say Allah is one. Do we worship Allah? Yes, we worship God. How do we worship God? We pray 5 times a day. And our connection to it becomes regurgitating theological statements. It becomes, well, I know that Allah is one. Some people will divide it into, I know the definition of what La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah technically means. I know that Aqidah is broken into these many branches and we have to believe all these things. So we can regurgitate those. But how often is it that we think about it experientially? So when I see a horizon and I just say, ooh, that's beautiful, do I think that's the Creator showing me His bounty in the world? When I see this clouds in the sky, a bird soaring in the heavens, when I see the beauty when my children make me happy, when I get in my car and it starts up, when I get in my car and it starts up and there's heat that's blowing, because I could be driving around in a car that just doesn't have heat. When my windshield wipers come on, we can talk about just a car all day long. It's fogging up, you put on defrost. Starts to rain, you got windshield wipers. What if you didn't change your windshield wipers? You're driving, you hit the corner really sharp and you didn't spin out, the tires are good. Alhamdulillah, there's air in the tires, you don't have to get a leak. I had a car, I had to put air in my tires every 2 days and add oil to it every 3 days. I don't have to do that anymore. And so those are opportunities for me to recognize the blessings of God. Those are opportunities for me to connect with my Creator in an experiential way, a real way where it's not just something that is a theological statement I regurgitate, or just an apologetic, something that I used to debate other people with. But also, can we challenge for ourselves the experiences that we've had, the miracles that we've literally seen in our own lives, the times when it shouldn't have been that we passed that exam. It shouldn't have been that we were successful in this way. We got the new job. The things we've been praying for materialized. When something bad was impending and all of our friends got it, but we didn't get it, etc., etc., etc. Do we just say, alhamdulillah, we thank God for it, and we keep on with our business? Or do we store that away and like, wow, God looked out? Do we attribute it back to the Creator, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're like, okay, I remember, I'm recognizing. Because if we do that, then all of these things become forms of worship. And all of those become experiential ways to now remember Allah in the good times, so that He will make things easy for us in bad times. And lastly, on this same topic, can I recognize that my perspective of the world is incredibly limited? So I'm frustrated, I'm mad, I don't know where my career trajectory is going. I've exhausted my means, I need more money, I don't know how to figure it out. I need a new car, how am I going to get the car? I want to buy a house, oh, my friends have houses, I can't buy a house, etc. Think, whatever it is. I want children, don't have them, they're stressing me out. Like, whatever it is. Is it possible that how I'm looking at it, as we already said, needs to be challenged? But is it possible that this is better than the opportunity or the situation that I want? Is it possible that what God is putting me in right now is actually what's good for me? Is it possible this becomes an opportunity for me to connect with God in a new way that I wouldn't have before? Is it possible that this is preparing me for something in the future? And so all of these things, can we open our hearts and our minds to, so that when the anxiety is arising, now we're thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a new way. We're remembering those bad times, or those good times. I'm anxious. Man, last time I was in a situation just like this, Allah took care of it for me. Or perhaps, I don't know what the future holds, but it's been good so far. It could be so much worse. I don't know what the future holds, but Allah is generous. This is how, and Allah knows best, in my humble opinion, when Allah says in the Quran, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub," is it not in the remembrance of God the hearts find tranquility? It's not just a recitation, it's a remembrance. It's when we're remembering and using that as a means to think about, orient, work on, control our emotions in those feelings. Again, emotions are normal and human. We all have them, we all experience them, and there's nothing we can do about that. The question is, how can we work with ourselves and not just merely accept how we're feeling because we're feeling it, and figure out what we can do with it. Some of us are predisposed to anxiety more than others. It's natural. The question is, what do we do? And how can we support each other in that? That's the last piece we'll comment on, that because we live so atomized, so separate, so stretched out from our family and friends, and our community is not what it used to be. We have to be very intentional to make community, to make relationships where we can depend on each other. And when I say community, I mean people that have shared purpose, invested interest, genuine care and concern. People, and it doesn't have to be a large number, but people that you can call and say, listen, I need you now, come. We need genuine, and not necessarily for bad things, I think the towns, like, we need to go right now to ask some questions. I mean people that will be there for us when we're going through things. Even more so, people who will ask about us regardless of what the situation is. How are you doing today? I can tell you're tired. What's going on? Do we need to talk? I'm going to cancel this. Let's get coffee. That are genuinely invested in our lives. Because if we don't prepare for that, then what do we have? And because we live in atomized, separate, spread out communities, living in our little fiefdoms, our mini mansions, wherever we live, we have the American dream. We have to work that much harder. It's not, we can't just go to the corner store and talk to the bread maker, and we can't talk to our cousin who lives down the street. We have to work to do that. And in order to do that, it's going to require vulnerability on our part. You can't develop a relationship unless both people are willing to be vulnerable. If I need you to support me in this, then I have to be also willing to show you part of who I am. We have to be patient, because I don't want to deal with your stuff sometimes, but I'm going to, because I care about you ideally. I'm doing it altruistically, but also I want you to do it for me. How can I ask you to show up for me and I'm not willing to do it for you? So we need to make sure that we're investing in those relationships, that we are deepening those relationships, like really not just trying to create them, but making them richer and deeper. But we also need to make sure in the process of doing that, we don't forget those that are close to us. So often we have family, we have friends that have been our day ones. They've been with us since the beginning, and we overlook them because we have expectations of other things. And that causes anxiety. That causes frustration. That causes unease. Because I don't have what in my mind it should be. And so now I'm uneasy. Or so often they've been there the whole time. They've been right there. But it's not perfect. It's not how I envisioned it was going to be. My expectations of you are, you're not hitting them, and so now I'm disappointed. When really there's so much there that if we just lower those expectations a little bit and loved a little bit more, perhaps we wouldn't be so anxious. So with that, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us all content and patient and forbearant with our difficulties. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us a people that are always mindful of Him, and find peace and tranquility in His remembrance. We're going to open up for Q&A, inshallah. I'm sure there's going to be a lot. And then I think we're going to have breakout sessions. Omar, tell me when the breakout session, because I'll do Q&A all night. So tell me when to stop for breakout sessions.
You can go for 15 minutes.
All right, Bismillah. Q&A. Yeah.
So one of my questions, first of all, I want to say Jazakallah for a beautiful lecture. May Allah help us take something from that and apply it for our lives, inshallah. I wanted to ask about a question regarding, so obviously anxiety. So from my experience personally, right, like we talked about this before the lecture, I think the biggest challenge for me has been, and you said it perfectly, is that, some people, they want kids, and then other people, they have kids, and they're like, my kids are stressing me out, right? And when you have a child, the biggest thing is obviously, like, the love you have for your child is so strong, and you want to be able to control a lot of things. And I think I'm the kind of person where I'm a perfectionist, and I'm also kind of like to control things. And so when things seem like they're overwhelming, or I feel like I want to have more control, and it doesn't feel like it's in control, it gets difficult. And for me, I'm the kind of person where if I have a lot of anxiety, and I'm sure there might be people out there who are the same, where instead of going towards Allah, they're actually so overwhelmed with their anxiety that they actually go the opposite direction. Not because they don't feel like they can rely on Allah, but because they're so overwhelmed with their own anxiety that they're like, okay, I don't have time for this right now. I can't even think about sitting down and reading Quran right now. I can't even think about making dua right now because I have, I'm working, I'm taking care of my child, I'm, part of this rat race, I'm trying to make money, I'm trying to, move up the ladder, right? And like all the aspects, you're trying to kind of balance everything. And then you also want to have some relationship with God and have that reliance on Him. So what advice would you give to people who actually go the opposite direction and they actually go further from Islam or further from God when they are going through hard times because they feel that depression or anxiety?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question.
This is a long question. Sorry.
No, it's cool. I actually think it's a very common phenomenon. Both men and women get anxiety or can be anxious. How we respond to it, in my humble experience, tends to be interesting. Oftentimes, when we want to control things, we start to hyper-focus on them. When what we really need is to feel safe and secure. What we really need is to feel contentment. We need to feel safe. And the way that we're trying to do that is to have our fingers on all of it, so that I can make sure that what I want materializes, which then leads to depression because a lot of times we can't control it and things slip through the cracks, and now I'm sad that what I wanted didn't happen. It's also, from a spiritual perspective, it's also somewhat dangerous. Again, if you have, so I didn't mention this before. One, there's nothing wrong with anxiety. If you need help with anxiety, talk to someone. Talk to a therapist. Talk to someone who's trained in it, ideally someone who has experience with it. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's incredibly helpful. I think a lot of times when we do that, it's almost a centrifugal force, where we say, no, I don't need dua, so I focus more. And that turns us inward more and more and more, when the thing that we end up focusing around and get stuck in is the thought of me. And so that causes a lot of problems. When you forget removing God from the conversation right now, what do they tell kids to do? Stop, count 10, take deep breath. Do those very simple, basic things we've all learned. Do what? They cut up that negative feedback loop. And so by being able to do that in a spiritual context, thinking about God, that doesn't mean we don't exhaust our means. The house is on fire, we don't just be like, oh, wow, thank you, bring the rain. Like, no, you bring the buckets of water. If in times of emergency you have to respond a certain way, but at the same time, can you be mindful of where you are? And so I think it's very common, actually, particularly with anxiety, that when you start to get stuck in that anxiety, you don't want to do those things. And if there is time for pause, if there is time for respite, if there's time for breath, then infusing Allah into it with dua, with dhikr, and it doesn't have to be extra. So it's a huge problem with most people nowadays. We just so extra with everything. We think that I need to have like a giant sibha, and I need to like subhanallah. Like, we don't have to be extra. Like, it can just be remembering Allah in your heart. And like, inshallah, alhamdulillah for what I do have. Like, it doesn't have to be performative. Can we be Muslims in a way that is naturally ours? Now, for some people, it may be like, I need to sit down, get my 1,000 sip habibs, and like, I'm gonna go through this whole link. I'm gonna take 20 minutes to just go through this so I can like really center. Beautiful. Sometimes we don't have that. So then what do we do? Can we just for a second, inshallah, this will be okay, keep moving. And the hope is that we can build up our tolerance when we're not as anxious, so that when coup hits the fan, we're a little bit stronger and able to. This is like popcorn, yes.
I have a question on like how do you interact with like people that kind of like trigger anxiety, and like especially when it comes to like family members or like related to.
Yeah. How do you deal with family or people that you're close to who trigger our anxiety? Can I have a cup of water, please? No, thank you so much. How do you deal with family, particularly when they trigger your anxiety? You tell them. It's your fault if you're doing this. SubhanAllah. There's two different types of relationships. You have parents, family, siblings, and then you have spouses, husband, wife, etc. In both, in your parents, you didn't really choose them. They were yours. Your siblings, you did not choose them. Nor did you choose the disposition that they'll have. So like for my entire life, I've gotten my mom's nerves because the way that I combat my anxiety is I'm chill as a pickle. The more anxiety I am, the more I'm just like, whoop, whoop. And my mom will be like, how's my mom? I'm like, she'll be all right, don't worry about it. She's like, I can't stand you. There's a problem. I can't control her trauma response or her anxiety. Thank you so much, Dr. Faye. I can't control her, she can't control mine. With family, particularly those that are our blood family that we didn't choose, there's nothing to do about it. So how do we make lemons out of lemonade? And how do we learn healthy coping mechanisms? Through communication, through knowing us to work with these people. You'd be surprised how well communication works. I was doing counseling for a couple that's of different ethnic backgrounds. And I had both families on this massive Zoom. It was awesome. His family, her family. And I recognized that the reason that we're having the problem is the mothers are very different. His mom was passionate and emotional. Her mom was diplomatic and straight. So the passionate mom would get anxious because the diplomatic mom didn't want to offend her and would like pull back. And so I said, auntie who's passionate, you have to recognize that the diplomatic auntie doesn't speak English as well as you. So that's another barrier. Auntie who's diplomatic, you gotta stop. She needs you to tell her what it is and don't be worried about her. On the phone call, passionate auntie says, well, my son he's not home right now, so I'm worried about him. Diplomatic auntie raised her hand. Excuse me? I didn't like this. He is home. Our house is home. Don't say that. She was like, what? The passionate auntie's like, what are you talking about? She's like, don't say that he's not home. He's home. He's with us. So he's with family. She's like, okay. I was so happy. Look at how communication fixed it. Passionate auntie's like, oh, sure, no problem. Diplomatic auntie's like, oh, I got it off my chest. I feel good now. So when we're dealing with our families, sometimes it's really just finding what it is, picking a time that's ideal, not in the middle of like one person's in an anxious panic attack, the other one pissed off, and be like, it's because you always did. No. Can we find the nice way when things have cooled down to be like, listen, next time can we not deal with that? And if you happen to be the cool person, you have to make sure you're not responding in a very, you don't up, excuse me, what am I trying to say? Don't up the ante. If you are cool, use the cool to help the other person. Now, husband and wife is a little bit different because, mashallah, we learned it's like part of our job to trigger our spouse. It's like, And we don't, whether we recognize it or not, like we've become experts at like poking and then twisting. The Prophet said that marriage is half your faith. And I think, as I've mentioned many, many times before, it's because it opens us up to half we didn't know they existed. It allows us to recognize who we are. And so when we're working with our spouse and we're loving them genuinely and we're trying to be with them in this relationship, well, if I can, oftentimes I find that we think about relationships, we think about them in short goals, short intervals. So like 1 year, even less, 1 month, 1 week, when really we need to think about 5 years. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. And if we have a long-term vision, okay, he or she is anxious this way. He or she responds to me doing this way. How can I learn to work with them so that I can, in the long run, have it? If we can get used to each other that way, it makes things easier. Yes?
I want you just to, I will talk about my own experience, but I want you also to talk about that point. When you are an anxious person and
Yeah.
raising a child, you are impacting this child because, first of all, you are the role model of that child. One of the things that I found it helpful is to share my emotion with my child. And whenever I'm anxious, I tell him how it feels to be anxious, physically, emotionally, and God bless his kids, is we sit together and I teach him like, okay, this is what they say. I'm a psychologist.
Oh,
but this
okay.
is what
I
they
was
say.
like, man, you're a boy, mashallah.
I'm anxious now, can we sit? Maybe we can do breathing exercise together. Can we help mommy do this exercise together? And I start really doing the breathing exercise. I touch his tummy and I say, this is where you need to start breathing. But it came after a long time thinking that I need to shape my child from my emotion because I'm mom. I don't want him to feel like why I'm anxious. I have a lot of problems in life. I'm a single mom. I'm going through this and that. But it came after years when I noticed the first anxiety on him, but he doesn't know he's a child. He doesn't know what he's feeling anxiety. I know it. And I really want to leave it to the families here.
Yeah.
Try to teach your kids a coping mechanism, even if you're not in control.
Yeah.
And you're still learning your own emotion and how to manage your own emotion, but take your child with this journey because at least now your child knows what it means to be an anxious person.
Yeah.
And hopefully they might not need a psychologist or to go to a house.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for sharing that. It's funny because it's sort of me and my mom's relationship. She's very anxious, and we didn't realize it. I'm African American, so there's a cultural thing there as well. But like, we just didn't realize mom's anxious, and we talk about it now. She's like, I call you OCD. I'm like, I think so, sister. But as you mentioned, what also I have to recognize is my own anxiety. So while I'm cool, if my wife is anxious, it's almost like a force field. I can feel it. And she doesn't have to say she's anxious, she doesn't do anything. I'm like, what's going on? I can feel it. Just by you sitting here, I can feel it. And that's from my childhood, right? And then my kids see Baba responding in a certain way, Mama's responding in a certain way. That's anxiety. I think it's super important that we talk to our kids about all of these things. I jokingly tell my kids, you can't make fun of Mama. English is not her first language. Don't get fooled by the fact that she doesn't have an accent. If she says close the lights, don't make fun of her. You know, that's just a normal thing. But also, okay, you see Mama's upset right now. Can you calm down? Come talk to me if I'm home. Wait till later to talk to Mama. You have to be able to calm. When they're anxious, they're fighting with each other. Take deep breaths. Let's bring the tone down. Let's talk about these things so that they can help them. I did it before I came here today. My wife came home, pistachios all over the floor. Where's the pistachios on the floor? It was her fault. She goes upstairs, where's the baby? She had the baby. Baby's in the bathroom digging in the toilet. She's like, oh my God, you're all grounded. I don't want to see anything. I go upstairs, like, what's going on, guys? The kid's like, oh. I'm like, oh. I'm like, all right, guys, we need to take a breath. What's going on? Your mama said we're grounded. Why are you grounded? The baby was in the bathroom. I'm like, why was the baby in the bathroom? Because I have pistachios. I'm like, what is going on? So I said, everyone has to calm down. I went to my wife. She said, I don't want to hear it. I was like, I need you to calm down. And we just had a conversation. And we come to find out, my daughter was doing what she was supposed to do. My son was playing Roblox and forgot about his sister, so he got in trouble. No more Roblox today, bro. Sorry. You can't do that. Now, he was sad, but it is what it is. And my wife was able to just recognize this person's in trouble for this thing. Alhamdulillah, we dealt with it. This is a normal family interaction. The question is, can we learn from it and build upon it? Can I recognize I'm triggered because they're super anxious, because now they won't have electronics for the rest of the weekend. It's a long weekend on top of that. But then also try to teach them ways to handle it. Yes.
Can you share ways on like what to do regarding like being anxious around like current events or like things that are kind of like outside of your more immediate bubble of?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. What can we do with current events or things that are outside of our immediate bubble? This is something that I learned very, very early on in my studies. Actually, Sheikh Burhan, the Imam of Dar Hijra, we were roommates and he taught me this. But he used to always make fun of me. Don't do that, that's not the best way. But he would always make fun. He's like, why are you whining about things? Why are you so frustrated with things? What's in your sphere of influence? What can you control? And recognize to what extent do you have control. Gaza, for example. Every one of us, heart goes out, whether you're Palestinian or not, as a part of the Muslim community, everyone's heart is going out for what's happening in Gaza, in Sudan, in Syria, in Lebanon, anywhere in the world where we're seeing these things, in LA, regardless. Our hearts are going out for the innocent, period. What can I do? I can pray for them. I can donate money. I can call my politicians. I can. And at a certain point, there's nothing else I can do. I have to also recognize what are the things that I'm comfortable doing. Maybe, am I a bad person because I'm not civically engaged? I don't think so. Could I work harder? Absolutely. But maybe I was raised and didn't grow up in politics, and that just feels really extra, and that causes anxiety. So I choose to pray more and not be engaged. We have to just recognize who we are, how much we have the ability to control. Yes, exactly. Recognize who we are, what we have the ability to control, and then after that, that's where the spiritual part comes in. That's when we raise our hands in prayer. That's when we recognize that God is ultimately in control. A whole thing that I even talk about is how do we connect with how God describes himself in the Quran? All-knowing, almighty, all-powerful, all-wise, all-loving, all-compassionate. These names are there for a reason, and so I have to be able to trust with God, because this goes outside of my sphere of influence, you're going to take care of it. And so like letting go and letting God doesn't mean that I'm just like letting things happen in the ether. It means that I'm trusting that Allah, God, will take care of this. And so what's in our sphere of influence, you take care of that, you do what you can. What falls outside of that, you relinquish it to God. You pray, you make a zakah, you make remembrance, you do all these different things, and Allah is best. Questions, comments, critiques? I think we have time for
We can do like two more.
two more. And if you don't want to ask, because of course you don't have anxiety, you can ask hypothetically on behalf of someone else. Yeah.
I'm curious about like so for people, there are some people who actually do have like mental illnesses, or they have anxiety, or other people who have any kind of test. It doesn't have to be anxiety, but something going through something happening in their life that's making them anxious or they're depressed or something like that. So we've been taught throughout our life, right, that Allah tests those He loves. And for someone who's going through something, like people are going through some terrible stuff out there, like something that's going on in my life or someone else's life might be nothing for someone else, like people in Gaza, for example. So how do we take what's going on in our life and how do we actually truly feel like God loves us? Because that's something hard, right? Because if you think about like a real life relation, mother-child, like you're not gonna say like something bad happens to your child, and you say I love you, and I'm testing you, and you know this is just something you gotta deal with. I love you so much. You don't really see that in a normal relationship when we talk about love, and I think that's something that that's something that I tend to struggle with. That mentality of like, how do you love someone and test someone that you love. And so that's something that I'm curious about, because there are people who go through real serious things, and I want to hear from your perspective, like how do we balance that and truly understand what does it really mean when we say Allah loves those who he tests?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. You mentioned like a worldly love that we have as humans, right? MashaAllah, beautiful son. He's going to start growing up. May Allah protect him. Is it healthy to shield him from all difficulties and all hardships? Is that healthy? No. And sometimes he's going to go through things and you're going to watch him do it, knowing he's about to, you can let him do it. That's a part of his growth. That's a part of him learning. Does that mean you love him less for doing it? No. Actually, you may be loving him more. There will be times where he's going to act up and you may have to discipline him. And that disciplining doesn't mean that he's bad necessarily, or that you love him less. The example that I often use is if he's going to stick a fork into an electric socket, you don't talk to him, Habibi, please don't do that. Most likely going to pop his hand. Don't touch that. That is dangerous. God is exalted upon all examples. But how God is far more grandiose than anything we can imagine. But if we can recognize that love is more complex than lust, that love is more complex than the rosy Hollywoodized emotion that we often associate with love, that love is actually the ability to forbear through difficult times, that love is actually the ability to find beauty in the cracks, beauty in the hardship. Why do we look at an old couple and recognize their love? Is because they were able to get to an old age despite that. Why do we think it's cute when an old couple fights, but then they're like, oh, he's so stupid? Like, because we're able to recognize the beauty in the difficulty. And so when we're thinking about our connection with God, we have to be able to, at least if we can change how we think about love from our human perspective, then perhaps we can change about how we think about God. Also, we think about love on a purely horizontal plane. At worst, I love you because I'm getting something out of it. At best, I love you because of qualities that you have, and I'm just being altruistic. This is quid pro quo. This is worldly. We will perish one day. God give us long, healthy lives. This is it. Now, if we bring spirituality into it, we love you for the sake of God in hopes that we go to paradise. What about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who understands time, space, this life, next life? We don't know, and we know that He is all just, all wise. And so even if you've gone through difficulties and hardship, you're going to be paid back, compensated for whatever that we have done. And so no, we don't think that, as I've heard my teacher say about Gaza specifically, they're either dying as martyrs or living as saints. And they're showing, I think the most important thing, for me at least, when I'm thinking about these travesties, is how can I learn from it? Like, when I see their faith, a little 12-year-old girl cooking, making whatever out of nothing. It's like, how is she still so cute, smiling? Like, how? Like, you're hearing this Nana buzzing above her head. How? How is we sad every single day talking about these things? How are mothers still, doing what they're doing in Sudan? And wherever in travesty, how are these people still persevering in LA? Like, these are very real things that really can be opportunities for us to explore. Like, how connected am I to my life and the things that I have, and how much can I appreciate them more? I just saw a video clip yesterday, no problem, of a woman whose husband was healthy and everything, and he dropped dead. And she was like, she said she doesn't remember this, but her friend who came to help, she was holding her kid's hand saying, we will be patient with God's decree. And I was like, whoa, I'm not there. And then I was like, then my anxiety started being triggered. My wife, she's sitting over there. First, did she hear this? And now she's being anxious. She heard it. Now I'm anxious because she. And I was like, you know what? Allah's in control. And so we have to be able to think about it in a much more holistic, broader perspective. And at the end of the day, recognize that there's ignorance is bliss, and that our ability to understand everything in its complete complexity is beyond us. And so what lies outside of our understanding, comprehension, knowledge, we have to let go and leave it for the most wise. Yes?
You just kind of described a situation like where you talked yourself off a ledge, in a moment, like a split second.
Almost like every day.
Yeah, and we all do that. And so I know like you use faith, and, like that's something that I use too, but sometimes you deal with friends or loved ones that maybe are on a journey with faith, maybe they don't even believe it, maybe they're just not there yet. How do you recommend like kind of trying to help people kind of talk themselves off the ledge when they're coming to you, or even if you just notice it, and you don't want to be overbearing by like, God's gonna do, because they're just like not always receiving that.
I think even, it's a wonderful question. I think even with spiritual people, religious people, you have to be careful. I know when I'm in the thick of it, my wife's like, listen, Allah is testing you, brother, it's gonna be okay. I'm like, yo, shut up. Leave God alone right now. This is talking about me. We've got into fights about this. You don't recognize my feelings. And so I think we just need to be careful. Again, as I started, we live these modern lives and you know, it's all complicated. You know, this is why I think there's a huge problem between generations. Our parent generations are just like, God, okay, said, done. Whatever we gotta do. And that goes across religions, like the Civil Rights era and African Americans living in America, and like, man, amazing. And I think as privileged folks in the postmodern world, it's very different for us. And so I think when we're with supporting people, we have to do a couple things. One, recognize the limitations of our own capacity. If you can't do this for your own well-being, it's okay to be like, yo, I'm not the one. I'm gonna take you to someone else, but I don't have the capacity, because we don't need two people now hurt. You both having panic attacks is not helping. Two, if you do, what's the extent of your training and knowledge? You may not be able to help this person besides sitting with them. It's okay to tell them, I don't know what we're gonna do. I don't know how we're gonna get out of this situation, but I'm here, and I'm gonna support you in this difficult time. Also, you don't have to bring up religion, like, ask them what do they need. Like, being able to cut the cycle and say, yeah, I hear you, validating their emotions, recognizing what's going on, not saying something sometimes, particularly if it's your fault, is really helpful. And then, if possible, husbands, don't try this, ask them to breathe. To take a deep breath. Husbands, I don't recommend it. But you know, if it's possible, sometimes it's just mimicking it. You taking deep breaths in front of them. So they can, you know, sort of, I forget the technical term, but they can sort of mimic you respond the same way. This sounds like a lot. There's a lot. And I'm feeling really anxious because there's a lot going on. So can I have a minute? They're just like, man, how are you doing? And then if an opportunity comes to be like, the Lord, like we can start preaching. But you can't come in with that. No. Sure. We're gonna do breakouts?
Yeah, we're gonna do breakout groups
All right.
now. Oh, thank you very much, Imam Abdul Malik Merchant. You can applaud now if you'd like. So now we're going to do the breakout and discussion groups, and if you've been to Fubble before, you kind of know how this works. I'm going to read the community guidelines that we do to basically facilitate good and healthy discussions, and then we're going to move you guys around, which is going to get pretty chaotic, so just bear with us. I'll go through the guidelines, then we'll explain how you're going to reorganize yourself. So, has anyone here been to Fubble before, by any chance? Yeah, so I'm going to count on you guys. Do you know any of the community guidelines? Off the top of your head, she's like, oh man, I wasn't taking notes. It's fine, I'll just go through them, okay? So one of them is just step up, step back. That just means we don't want any one person to completely dominate the conversation. So you say your piece, and then let someone else say their piece. And then once everybody talks, then people can go again. Then we have old friends. I like this one a lot. Do you ever notice that like you're really nervous sometimes when you're talking to new people? But like when you're talking to your old friends, you're like, just chill, you're normal, right? And then you say to them like, wow, you get nervous talking to people? We're chill, we're vibing. Like I had no idea. So like that's what I need you to exude for this thing. Like talk to everyone in your circle like you've known each other for a long time. Don't be nervous, just be friendly, be really open, be chill, and you know, just have a good time. We have yes and. For this one, we don't want people to explicitly disagree with each other. You know, let someone say their piece, let them say their story, and then you say yes and then you say your story. We have maintain the amana. So it's possible that some of you will say stories that you wouldn't want to be shared otherwise. Maintain the amana means basically maintain the trust. So if there's a story that's been shared in your circle that you don't want, that you know they would not want to be said elsewhere, don't say it elsewhere. We have see something, say something. If someone's having like an emotional response to something, they're very sad, very angry, even very happy, recognize that emotion and then hold space for that emotion. We have also embraced discomfort. It's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable. That's how you grow. Go within your own comfort zone, of course, but it's okay to talk about things that sometimes might make you or the other people just a little bit uncomfortable. And then we have keep it halal. This is really important because we don't want anyone to accidentally backbite in one of the circles. So if you're saying a story about somebody else, use fake names, say it in a way that no one can tie it to who the actual person is. And then lastly, we have campground rules. Just help us clean up after because we are all very tired and there's a lot of chairs here. So what we're gonna do is, I would like you to basically flip your chairs so that two rows form one circle. So example, this would be one circle basically, and then this will be another circle, and then just keep doing that. And then we also have volunteers here who are gonna help you figure that out.